right, share screen. All right, I think we got it. We got it. So last Sunday, what'd y'all think of that mess? So there's a lot of different kinds of topics that people just avoid because they don't want the fight, because they know it's going to end up in some sort of at least hurt feelings or an argument. And it's those topics, though, that we need to be prepared for. It's the ones that we need to have a better grip on, because if we have a better grip, then we're not going to get emotional. We just say, this is how it is. This is what Scripture says. And if we can separate the fact that we're not trying to come to the defense, because God doesn't need defense, God defends himself. All we need to do is educate people as to what they may be ignorant of. They just might not have the information. So we're just kind of God's conduit and just relaying God's information to them. And then what they do with it after that is, it's on them. It's not us. So we don't need to get all huffy and red in the face and be like that angry lady yelling at the cat. I never understood that meme. I don't know what it is, but that's always that angry lady yelling at the cat. And I thought it would get a chuckle, and it did. So there were a couple of follow-up questions that I got this week, and the questions all can be answered with just one biblical event, and that's the flood. The flood changed everything. When God created the earth in 6 days, at the end, he said, "This is very good." And that means it is exactly to his specifications. He didn't think there needed to be any more, didn't need to be any less. Everything was perfectly balanced. It was exactly the way he wanted it. And if we've even thought about it, we don't really get a proper picture at all of what the earth looked like when God created it. Sure, we got this picture of the Garden of Eden, but how big was that Garden of Eden? Was it the whole world? Well, no, because when they sinned and God kicked them out, they had a whole nother world to go to. So what was it like outside of the garden? Was it desert and only the garden had greenery? No, that's not the case either, because God gave instructions to Adam that what you grow now is going to be from the sweat of your own brow. I'm not going to plant it for you anymore, which is what was provided in the garden. They had all of their food provided. They had all of the beauty provided. Everything was there. God still intended them to care for it because that was their job. Adam was supposed to name everything and tend everything. I don't know what tend means, because in a perfect world, you're not going to have weeds. So I don't know what he's tending, but that was his job. He was to tend the garden. But then when they got kicked out of a garden, they had the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is what we tend to not think about. Or if we did see some sort of movie about the curse moving into Cain and Abel and all of that, we kind of see them leaving the garden and they turn around and they see this wall of greenery and they turn this way and it's just desert. And that's not what it was at all. And we can tell that because of the fossil record today. So I'm not going to be one of those people, like I was talking about last week, that say that Satan put the fossils in the ground in order to confuse believers. Okay, because that's giving Satan way too much power. That says that he has the power to create, and he doesn't. Only God can create. Okay, so there has to be a different explanation, and that's where the flood comes in. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the flood and answer the 4 questions that was posed to me this week. I also told you be sure to have any other questions that may have come up from last week. So how did the Old Testament people live so long? That's a big one. Where did the floodwaters come from? Why were prehistoric things so big? And where did the dinosaurs go? Okay, so those are the questions that some of the questions that are asked as a follow-up from last week. Were there any others? Anything that you can think of from last week? I know there's tons. So like I said, this is usually a 10-week study when I go into this stuff. So
They were talking about different, God creating mankind in God's image, and about how there's so many different, images that we see, in humanity, different colors, different textures of hair, and
right.
on and on and on. But anyway, we were talking about one of our youth when I was a kid. They had a Dropbox. You can put anything in there. You can do his best attempt to answer the question. And his question was, why are Chinese eyes slanted? And so his theory was, well, you have to look really hard across the ocean, and they're adapted to where they're at. But anyway,
okay.
Funny. I mean, and
yeah.
funny but like going back to a lot of what this is saying.
Right. Now that's an easy one to answer. We got to go to our timeline.
But yes, go ahead. It's a fun conversation.
So when we have the flood, we know that we had on the boat Noah and Mrs. Noah. And then they had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and their wives. So there was 8 people on the boat. And in those 8 people, it contained all the genetic diversity that we have today. We know that Noah and Mrs. Noah were pure. I don't know how pure is defined, but that would be descendants of Seth. Okay, so that's the DNA that comes from Adam and Eve that is untainted by anything else. We really don't know where Cain's wife came from. That's one of those questions that you got to add to the list of things to ask God, because we don't know. We know that there was Adam and Eve. We know there was Cain, Abel, and Seth. All we can do is assume that the daughters weren't named. Okay, but we just don't know. But what happened when the flood occurred and they've now landed on top of Mount Ararat, Ham, Shem, and Japheth were told, just like all the people were from the beginning, to go out and fill the world. And we know that Ham, Shem, and Japheth all went to different parts of the world. And that's where these other timelines start coming in. Shem is the European line. Okay, so when he migrated from Mount Ararat in Turkey, he went northeast, okay, to head up into Europe. And then we know that Ham went down into Africa. He went due south, and he is the father of the Cushites and the Canaanites and the Egyptians and all of that. So that's where the Middle Eastern people came from. And then Japheth went far east. He's the one that went over into Asia. And as he migrated to Asia, of course, weather conditions are all very different. And there's a lot of snow and a lot of ice as he was going through Tibet. And I'm saying he and his generations that followed. And because they were dealing with the potential of snow blindness, the microadaptation, which all humans do, a simple example would be if your family is all Yankees living in Minnesota for years and years and years, you move to Texas and you about to die that first summer. But by the second summer, you've started to adapt. Okay, that's microevolution, the way that they're trying to define it these days. And that adaptation then gets passed down from generation to generation. Well, for that race, because of the extra ice, snow, bright sun, and everything, they needed more shade on their eyes. And so it actually is an extra fold of skin that has grown, adapted over generations to give that extra shade from the sunlight. So I don't know if that's what you were going for, but I had to. Yeah. I had to. So yeah, that's good questions. There's always lots of these kinds of questions. And that explanation gets into some of that shaky ground that an evolutionist will say, see, there is evolution. No, adaptation is not the same as evolution. Evolution says you go to bed a lizard, you wake up a bird. Okay. Yeah, the bombardier beetle. Yeah, so that's evolution, and that is not what we're talking about. Adaptation is different. So all of these questions can be answered by the global flood of Genesis. Okay. So, can one thing help explain all of these questions? Well, with a global event like the flood, the effects of creation, the effects on creation can't be explained by just thinking of a frog choking gully washer and saying, well, it's 100 times that. Okay. We all know what a gully washer is, and we know what effect it can have on land. And that's just, a heavy 6-inch or 8-inch rain as it comes through. Well, if you start imagining, Eric, when I see you, I'm like, oh, did I turn my mic off? Yeah, I turned my mic off, so we're good. It is. So by looking at the conditions of the earth pre-flood, you can make a lot of observations, and seeing what the effects of the flood were on the world, it's obvious that the world after the flood was very different than the world before the flood. And so that's what we can talk about. So just a review from last week in the creation account. Day 1, we have light. Day 2, we got separation of waters. There was waters above the firmament and waters below the firmament, and the firmament God called sky. Day 3 was dry land, plants. Day 4 was lights, the lights of space. So sun, moon, stars, all of that. Day 5 is birds and fish. Day 6 is the land animals and man. So let's focus on day 2. So in Genesis 1, verse 6, it says, and God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. Okay. Now, people tend to think 2-dimensionally. Even though we're 3-dimension people, we tend to think, okay, in what directions can we go? We can go this way, this way, that way. We tend to think 2-dimensionally. But when God is separating water from water with this vault, and he makes the vault that separates the water under the vault and the water that is above it, and he calls the vault sky. Now, notice he didn't say clouds. He didn't say mist. He said waters. There's water below the sky. Well, duh, that's the ocean, seas, whatever. But what is this water above the sky? There's different words that are used for clouds in Hebrew. So it's not a cloud. What is the waters that's above the sky? The same word is used for the waters below. So we're talking about an ocean's worth of water that was above the sky. That's interesting. And that's just by looking at God's word. So this introduces the vapor canopy theory. Okay. It is an hypothesized stratospheric umbrella of water vapor that seems to have enveloped the earth in its original atmosphere from the second day of creation until its dissipation in the 40-day torrential rains of the Great Flood in Genesis 7. Now, you need to understand this is an interpretation. This is not scripture. It is a theory that is based in scripture, and it's the best that we can do with what scripture has told us. There was no scientists present at creation making notes of all of the science stuff that God was doing. And because Moses, as he was writing this stuff down, wasn't really a scientist, he was just writing it down as God gave it to him. So it's impossible to actually know if this is how it was. But by looking at this theory, it really explains a lot of stuff. So, day 3, in verse 9, and God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and he gathered the waters the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So God didn't create land. What did he do? He just pushed the water aside and gathered all of the water to one big ocean. And then what was left was one giant landmass. And we get that from scripture. Now, what does science call that landmass? Pangea. Good job. Okay. So there actually is a name for that. Haven't you always wondered why the shape of Europe and Africa looks like it fits so well into Canada and US and South America? It just fits together. That's because it did used to fit together. And we know later, I think it's like Genesis 47, it says, in the days of Peleg, P-E-L-E-G, in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. And so at that time, science scripture scholars say that that's when Pangea broke up into its individual continents that we have today. So that was in the days of Peleg. So we've got Pangea as one giant landmass, and then we've got all of the seas gathered together in one place, all of the waters below the sky. Okay. So what would the conditions of the world look like with this vapor canopy? Okay. Anyone who has ever been diving, even just a few feet under the water, you feel the pressure on your ears, right? And you've got to equalize that pressure, because if you don't, that the pain in your ears is going to be too much. What causes that pain? Okay, it's atmospheric pressure. Water weighs a lot more than air. And so if you have the water pushing down on you as you're diving, that pressure is pushing on your eardrums, compressing the air that's behind your eardrums, and that's what causes the pain. So until you equalize the pressure, you're going to have that pain. The point, though, is that water weighs a lot more than air. So now if we've got a big water bubble now that's above our atmosphere, what's that weight of the water going to do to the atmosphere? It's going to push on it, and it's going to greatly increase the pressure. We're going to have warm tropical weather due to the greenhouse effect, because now we've got this water bubble that allows light in. That's going to warm up what's under it. And then that radiant heat is going to go up and hit that water bubble and bounce off and come back down again. And that's the greenhouse effect. And so it's going to be humid. It's going to be warm. It's going to have a lot of trapped gases in it. Higher atmospheric pressures. It's going to have a higher oxygen content. It's going to have a higher carbon dioxide content. I'm asking you to pull on science now. What do plants breathe? Plants breathe in CO2, and they produce oxygen and sugar as their out processes. Okay. So if you give a plant a lot more moisture and a lot more CO2, what's it going to do? It's going to love it, and it is going to grow bigger and faster. Okay. And we've got higher humidity because we've got all of this water that's not only in the ocean, but now water that's above the atmosphere as well. Now, how did the water stay up there? I don't know. That's a God thing. Okay. Because that defies physics. Solid liquid water cannot be above the air. Its density is too high. And it wants to be below the air because air has less density. So how did that work? I don't know. That's a God thing. We don't have an explanation for that. H2O zone, yeah. So testing air bubbles trapped in the amber alongside trapped insects shows that the oxygen content at the time the insect was trapped is 50% more than today. So that's scientific fact from today. You can test the air bubbles that are trapped in the amber along with the prehistoric insects. And that air is different. 50% more oxygen. Amber is sap, basically, that the insects get trapped in, and it's petrified sap. So they've done a lot of experiments with amber. If you remember Jurassic Park, it's not too far from the truth, okay? Because they can take the insects and they can actually extract the blood that's still in the abdomen of the insects, mosquitoes. And they have found DNA strands of all sorts of different creatures. And they can use that to actually genetically create a dinosaur. There's already been experiments with that. So Jurassic Park is not too far from the fact of what we can do. Yeah, they've already done it with the woolly mammoth. There is a baby woolly mammoth now. Yeah, absolutely. So giant reptiles like the pterosaur would have had enough atmosphere to push against to actually be able to fly. That's one of the things that the evolutionists have a problem with, because the pterosaur doesn't have feathers. It has scales. And so a scaled, solid-boned, winged creature should not be able to fly. It wouldn't be able to fly today. But with the higher pressures that the vapor canopy would cause, the air is thicker, if you will. And because the air is thicker, the pterosaur would actually be able to fly. There's more to push against. And so the fact that it doesn't have feathers and that it has solid bones doesn't matter anymore, because the air would be sufficient for it to flap against and get lift. Plants would take advantage of the conditions to make the whole world look like a tropical rainforest. Now go back to Adam and Eve. They leave the garden where everything is nice and organized and tended, and they walk out of the garden. What do they see? Tropical rainforest, where you need a bushwhacker to get through because everything is so thick and overgrown. Now it's going to look like those pictures of the prehistoric world that you might have seen in your science books, where the ferns are as big as the room and the trees grow to the size of the giant conifers in the redwood forest, all of that kind of stuff. And that's just because the weather conditions are so different before the flood than they are after the flood. Okay. Insects would grow to larger sizes because of these different conditions. Also, even today, it's scientific fact that water is a great shield against radiation. If you look at how nuclear reactors are built, the biggest shield is not lead and concrete and steel, which they use that, but the biggest shield is this giant swimming pool full of water, because water is the best neutron shield and it's cheap. Okay. So we know that this vapor canopy, since it's made of water, is going to be protecting the Earth from all of the radiation that's in space. So we all know about UV radiation, right? That's the stuff that gives us sunburn, and that damages our skin. But besides UV radiation from space, there's also X-rays that come from space. What happens if you get too many X-rays? You burn up and it causes cancer. Okay. I remember my bus driver when I was in elementary school, she had this weird scar patch on her neck. And what happened is that she went in to have radiation therapy on her thyroid, and they left her in the machine too long. And it just ripped all of the skin off of her throat, and she had to have skin grafts and all kinds of stuff because of that. And so I asked her, of course, I ask everything to everybody. Stacy hates it because I ask everybody questions. But you got to know. That's right. Sometimes I even ask uncomfortable questions to people. So excuse me if I do that sometimes. So that water is going to protect the whole world from UV, from X-rays, from cosmic rays, from gamma rays. All of that radiation is in space and it's bombarding us today. Okay. If you just in this room and you turn on a Geiger counter, it's going to click. And every click is a radioactive particle that hits it. So that means right now we're constantly bombarded with radiation. With the vapor canopy that was there prior to the flood, that stuff was blocked. Okay. Now, that's the science. Let's go to scripture. Question 1. How did people live to be so old before the flood? So I got some ages here for you. And we got birth dates and death dates of Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. So these are the generations of men that were named prior to the flood. And you can see that their ages, 930, 912, 905, 910. Methuselah being the oldest, 969 years old when he died. These years, as we established last week, years are determined by what? Your trip around the sun, right? One revolution around the sun counts as a year. And every time you come back to your day and month anniversary of that trip around the sun, that's another year. Well, day 3, God already put the sun in the sky. And so before man, the sun was there. And why did God, if y'all remember that scripture, why did God give us the sun and the moon? To measure time. Because the light was already there, day 1. The evening and the morning, the first day, the evening and the morning, the second day. But by the third day, he could have said, and there was sunset and sunrise, the 4th day. But he was still staying the same with there was evening and there was morning. Light was already there in day 1. God is light. Okay. But when he put the lights in the sky, the sun, the moon, and the stars, it specifically says in scripture, he did it for us to keep calendars in order to measure our holy days. So the reason for the lights in the sky was for us to set times for ourselves. Okay. So what we use to measure years is already there. So how would it come up to 930 if it didn't actually mean 930 revolutions around the sun to get to that current month and day again? Okay. So this is literal years. But if we look at how the years change after the flood, so I've got everybody pre-flood on the left, and then I got people after the flood on the right. So I've got some footnotes here. So we got Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch. I got a little footnote 1 right there. There's no age for Enoch. Why? He didn't die. Good. Yeah, he didn't die. Scripture says that Enoch walked the earth, and then one day he was no more. God took him away. He didn't die. Okay, so we don't use an age for Enoch. We got Methuselah, 969. We got Lamech, which is 777. Now that seems out of the ordinary. Why do you think Lamech's life was short? He was killed in the flood. Yeah, when the whole world got wiped out, he was still alive when the flood came. So he got wiped out too. So he didn't die of natural causes. He most likely died because of the flood. Noah, 950. Little footnote here, Noah lived 63% of his life before the flood. So the effects of the world after the flood would not have had as much of an effect on him because he was already 2/3 of a normal lifespan through. Okay. And so you can see the average lifespan, excluding Enoch, before the flood is 912 years. Average lifespan of a human being. That's pretty amazing. But then you look after the flood. Shem already is affected because he only lived 16% of his life before the flood. 84% of his life was after the flood. It's a lot more time than Noah had exposed to the post-flood world. So he only lived to be 600, only 600 years old. Okay. Then we've got Arpachshad. Now, the reason I put him here is because he's the first person that we see in scripture to be born after the flood. Okay, so he's the first one that we see in scripture that lived his entire life in the post-flood world. Okay, then we got Shelah, Eber, Peleg. We got Peleg. I put that little note there. He's the first one that we see that doesn't even make it to 250. Now, this is only 6 or 7 generations after the flood. So even with adaptation, microevolution, whatever you want to call it, 7 generations shouldn't be enough to see a drastic change in anything. So even if genetically he's very close to, let's say, Noah, something else has changed to affect their lifespan. Because now we've got everybody after Peleg that they're not even making 250. Poor Nahor only lived to be 148. He was a pup. So it's something that has changed in the world that's affected the lifespan of people. And the event that did it, flood. So what could the flood change to make the world so different? Atmosphere. So Genesis 7, verses 11 and 12, it says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, they're measuring months, days, and years. On that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So this is that other question. Where did the flood water come from? To cover the earth, according to math, it would take 600 to 800 million cubic miles of water to cover the earth. 600 to 800 million cubic miles to cover the earth. The problem here is that they're trying to cover the earth as it looks today with Mount Everest. Mount Everest is 29,000 feet high. So in order to cover the earth and Mount Everest, so that there's another span of 18 cubits above Mount Everest, which is what scripture says that the depth of the water on the earth was, you would need 800 million cubic miles of water. You don't need that. And it doesn't work that way. Prior to the springs of the earth bursting, right? It says the springs of the great deep burst forth, according to scripture. The earth was smooth like a grape. But then when God opened up the fissures on the earth to allow the water out, the earth no longer looked like a grape. It now looks like a raisin. And if you look at a raisin, it doesn't have a smooth skin anymore. What does it have? It has wrinkles. It's got peaks and it's got valleys. The earth is the same now because the fissures opened up and let all of that underground water out. Now that crust of the earth, like a raisin, is crispy enough that it can't shrink. And so instead, it wrinkles. and it pushes mountains up and it pushes valleys down. And that's how we ended up with mountains and valleys, ignoring the fact that now there's nothing to cool the earth. And now the liquid hot magma is going to be bursting out as well. And now we got volcanoes. Okay. So all of this happens because now the earth lost its radiator and all the water now is on the surface instead of below. The floodgates of the heavens, the floodgates, not sprinkles, not rains, not streams, deluge. Yeah, the windows in the submarine were opened. Okay, so we are talking the floodgates. So where did all of this flood of heavenly water come from? The vapor canopy. That would be the explanation for it. So now, without the protection of the vapor canopy, what happens? Radiation all of a sudden is bombarding the earth. Aging is caused by damage to the human body or any body occurring to the cell structure faster than the cells can repair themselves or reproduce. That's the definition. Any scientist will tell you that's the truth today. The reason we age is because our bodies can't keep up with the damage anymore. Anything that gets damaged faster for some reason, irritation, infection, irradiation, that causes cell death to be sped up, causes more damage than at a normal rate. So there's something that's really interesting. I gave you a picture of a cell. In the nucleus of the cell, we've got, what are those X-looking things? That's your chromosomes, okay? And then what are the chromosomes made of? DNA. And we know that the DNA is that double helix of deoxyribonucleic acids, all of the different A, G's and T's and C's that come together in order to encode us, okay, for what we are. At the end of the chromosomes are these little sections of DNA that are different than the rest. And those little sections are called telomeres, okay? If you have shoelaces, everybody look at your shoelaces if you got shoelaces. At the end of your shoelaces, what do you got? You got little plastic caps. And those little plastic caps are called aglets. They actually have a term, okay? They don't mean baby Aggies, okay? I don't know who named them. Maybe it was an Aggie, but it is an aglet. And that aglet, that aglet actually keeps the fabric of your shoelace from what? Fraying and unraveling. Well, guess what? God put telomeres at the end of our chromosomes so that our DNA doesn't unravel. That DNA needs to stay together. Okay. Anybody knows that if you braid something, if you don't put something to fix the end of the braid, what happens? It comes undone. Okay. So God put telomeres at the ends of our chromosomes in order to keep the DNA from unraveling. But after the flood, God altered our DNA so that every time a cell reproduces, makes a copy of itself, the aglet telomere at the end of the reproduced cell is a little shorter than the parent cell. And this is shown by science today. So every time a cell reproduces, and then that reproduced cell reproduces, that reproduced cell reproduces, each time the telomere gets a little shorter, little shorter, little shorter. And eventually it's going to hit a time where when it reproduces again, guess what? No telomere. DNA unravels, and that cell now becomes nascent. It's dead. It's a dead cell, and it cannot reproduce. So what happens, as long as your cells produce quick, fast, and right, you're going to stay young. But if damage happens to where it needs to reproduce faster, then you're causing your cells to die faster. So if you are exposed to more radiation, that's more cellular damage that's occurring. And if you have more cellular damage, your body's going to try to keep up. And guess what? It can't. And so now we get effects of aging at a cellular level. This is cool. Does anybody know what a hyperbaric chamber is? Okay, explain it. Very simply.
It increases the atmospheric pressure. I'm assuming now to pre-floods atmosphere.
You got it. So hyperbaric chambers, hyperbaric treatment, it's a therapy that's used in medicine. What does it do? It does a lot of things, but it helps you heal faster. And these experiments in the hyperbaric chambers, which include greater pressure and greater oxygen, has been shown to increase the length of telomeres. They've shown it. It happens. So basically, it's not a fountain of youth. It's a hyperbaric chamber of youth. You can reverse the effects of aging by using hyperbaric therapy. And the rich people, they buy their own hyperbaric chamber. And they'll spend several hours in it every night in order to try to stave off the effects of aging. And that is a very strong argument for the higher oxygen and atmospheric pressure in a antediluvian or pre-flood world. Okay, it's a lot of stuff. Questions? I'll stop there for questions. A lot of stuff. All right, so takeaways so far. For the flood, big water bubble over the earth. What did that water bubble do for us? Protected us from radiation, and it also increased the amount of oxygen in our atmosphere. Higher pressure, higher moisture, higher oxygen. All right. Nutrition. Let's look at this. Before the flood, the nutrition found in the plants would have been much better than post-flood. Because of better growing conditions, the nutrient fixing in the plants themselves would have been off the charts. Before the flood, what did people eat? Plants. And there was no nutrition deficiencies because God said, I've given you everything that you need. They didn't need to eat meat before the flood because everything the body needed was in the plants. But after the flood, look at this, Genesis chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you green plants, I now give you everything. So before the flood, they ate plants. After the flood, God is saying, nope, you're going to have to eat animals too. Why? Why the change? That's exactly right. Now the plants are not going to be able to produce for people what was produced before the flood. And we know something happened to plants because the first thing that Noah did when he landed on the ground was he planted a vineyard. And from that vineyard, he turned the grapes into wine. And he drank that first cup of wine and it knocked him on his tail. He was drunk and naked in the tent. And his son, Shem walks in and comes out and tells his brothers, Dad's naked, passed out in the tent. And Noah comes to and curses him because instead of covering him up like he should have, like a good boy, he made fun of him. And so Shem got cursed to be a servant of Ham and Japheth. That's a different story. Okay. So, but why would this happen to Noah? You get all the gold stars today. Good. So now, after the flood, It's different, way different than it was before the flood. Before the flood, he could have done it, made his wine, drank whatever he needed to drink, and he'd be fine. But one drink of wine took him out. It's very different than it was before the flood. All right, how did people live so old? I got that. Where did the water come from? Got that. Why were the dinosaurs so big? Let's talk about that. There's this word called gargantuanism. Okay, so gargantuanism is the word that describes just how big, the state of being big, okay, before the flood. Well, we've got better nutrition, abundant water and food, higher pressures, better oxygen supplies, and guess what? Everybody was veggie eaters. There's no predators. No predators before the flood. This allowed for the animals to grow unimpeded their entire natural lives, which was long, just like humans, long. So instead of having an alligator that's living 100 years, now we're going to have an alligator that's living 1,000 years. Okay, pre-flood, it's going to be a lot different. And we know amphibians and reptiles, they don't stop growing. They don't reach an adult size. As long as they live, they continue to grow. Yeah. Yeah. So the Galapagos Islands, I want to go there. It's on my bucket list. Okay. These islands are off the west coast of Ecuador, South America. They're protected lands because of the strange nature that still exists there. With an abundant food supply, no predator species, the reptiles and the amphibians grow to enormous sizes. Now, I'm not saying they're prehistoric sizes because they still have the radiation effects and bad foods, relatively today compared to before the flood. But here's some examples. We've got tortoises that grow to be 1,000 pounds. This tortoise fits in my aquarium at home. But you go to the Galapagos Islands, they'll live to be 400 years old. You can actually measure the age of a tortoise. How do you do it? They're rings, just like a tree. On their scales, on their back, they've got rings of light and dark, and you can actually count them. And that can tell you how old that tortoise is. And they've got tortoises on the Galapagos Islands that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. So nowhere near what it was on the earth pre-flood, but with the right conditions, these animals will continue to grow their entire life, never reaching an adult size. It's going to be a cool thing to see. Put it on your list. So there is a cactus there that is about 6 feet tall, and there is this lizard that's there at the bottom. That's, first of all, it's a funky lizard. I've never seen a lizard like it before, but there's still species on the Galapagos Islands that don't exist anywhere else. So it's just a funky little lizard that's only there. Funky little, it's a big lizard. It's as big as a dachshund. All right. Where did the dinosaurs go? Dinosaur fossils have been found that were formed during the flood, suggesting that some dinosaurs may have survived and even lived for centuries after. However, these dinosaurs would have faced challenges like habitat changes, competition, and disease, similar to animals today. Some say that unique physiology may have made it harder for these dinosaurs to adapt to these changes. So now, after the flood, we've got less pressure, less oxygen, less humidity. Plants are not producing like they used to produce. And it could be that just the physiology of the dinosaurs didn't allow them to get enough nutrition from the plants that they were getting before. And without enough nutrition, they basically starve themselves to death just because there's no food. So that's one way of looking at it. No one asked about fishes.
amphibious. With the pressure down low, you would just assume maybe that they would live longer or survive better.
So we know that before the flood, if the seas were saltwater, when all of that rainwater comes down, what does it do to the salt content? It dilutes it. And so if we're used to 80% brine as a fish, and now all this rain comes down, and now the seawater is now 30% brine, the fish that need salt water, what happens to them? They die. The fish that were living at the bottom of the sea, which may have only been 100 feet, well, now the bottom of the sea is 8,000 feet. What happens to the bottom dwelling fish? They're smushed because there's too much water pressure on them now. So yeah, people don't think about fishes. But when the flood happens, all the fish get to live. Oh no, the water changed too much. The fish don't even get to live. So does that mean Noah had to take fish on the ark too? I don't know. That's another question now that I'm going to have to ask. But more and more discoveries as we're exploring the ocean. We know less about the ocean than we do about space. And the ocean's right next door. So we're still discovering things in the ocean that scientists thought were millions of years dead. Oh, look, here's one and it's still alive. I showed a picture last week of a megalodon. Okay, do y'all remember that Jason, what's his name? Statham? Yeah. Jason Statham movie, the Meg? Okay, giant shark movie. Well, the megalodon is a shark that is like 100 times bigger than a bull shark, which is one of our biggest sharks. And they thought those were long time extinct. Well, they've done some deep submersible diving that is showing some crazy big sharks, much bigger than any of the species that we know today. Is it a Meg? I don't know. We'll have to catch it to find out. But it's so big, you're not catching it. Okay. So after the flood, the descendants of the representative mating pairs that were preserved on the ark survived in smaller populations. As other populations flourished, many dinosaur species would have succumbed to this harsher environment. Those kinds that did not become extinct in the centuries after the flood were hunted down as a threat or were killed for food, so that only a few still survive today in very remote areas. Okay, so yeah, are people causing extinction of animals? Yeah, we are. But can you imagine what happened after the flood? There's only 2 of the unclean things. There's only 7 pairs of the clean things, and they're asked to go reproduce, and Moses is told, you and your family can eat them. There's species that probably were eaten into extinction in just the first couple of generations, just because there weren't many around. Okay.
I have a question
Yes.
On the bird thing. So, like earlier you were saying I think very well, the
Pterosaur. Pterosaur is also pterodactyl.
So there was feathered birds and those that existed pre-flood, but the feathered birds weren't impacted by the atmosphere.
They were, yeah, they were all wiped out too, except for what Noah had on the ship with him. Yeah, all the species. He had representative species of everything. Yeah, but now, just like the entire genetic diversity of humans were in the DNA of Noah and Mrs. Noah, the pairs of animals that God called to the ark, they also would have been special to the point that they had all the genetic diversity of all of the subspecies in them. So did he have to take a dachshund and a German shepherd and a Shih Tzu and a Chihuahua? No. There was some genetic patriarch that had all of that genetic diversity inside of it, so that as the breeds and adaptation occur, the breeding and the adaptation occur, we end up with all of the subspecies of dog that we have today. Yeah, so birds are the same way. Some crazy bird that had all of the parakeets and parrots and cardinals and blue jays and painted buntings that we have today. Yep. Yep.
By design.
By design. We don't see the word dinosaur in scripture. Are dinosaurs in the Bible? The first time dinosaur shows up in science and literature was by Sir Richard Owen in 1842. And it's from the Latin word terrible lizard. Okay, so he invented this word dinosaur, never existed before 1842. The entire Old Testament was in its final form by 250 BC. Okay, so the Old Testament that Jesus and the disciples were grown on is set. It's the same Old Testament that we've got today. Okay. Job gives us some interesting scriptures. It doesn't have the word dinosaur in it. Pretty cool. It's terrible font. All right. So this is Job chapter 40, verses 15 through 17. This is God talking to Job. Take a look at Behemoth, which I made just as I made you. It eats grass like an ox. See its powerful loins and the muscles of its belly. Its tail is as strong as a cedar. Can this be an elephant?
No.
No. The sinews of its thighs are knit tightly together. And it goes on talking about its bones are as iron or bronze. Okay, so I mean, it's talking about a brachiosaur, what when we as kids used to call a brontosaurus. Okay, they don't call them brontosauruses anymore, they're called brachiosaurs. But the description is right in line with a brachiosaur. So Behemoth in the book of Job is a dinosaur. And what does God tell us? Take a look at Behemoth, which I made when? When I made you. Day 6, God made dinosaurs the same time that he made people. The difference, though, between the animals that God created and people, he gave Adam something special. What was it? Well, how did he do that? What was different? What did God do to Adam that he didn't do to the animals? He breathed life into him. God breathed life into Adam. God gave Adam pneuma. And pneuma is the scriptural word for spirit. Spirit, soul. Okay, so when scripture says that God created man in his image, that doesn't mean 2 legs, 2 arms, a torso, a belly button, and a head. That's not what God did. When God created man in his image, it means he created man, Trinity, body, soul, spirit, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We're created in God's image, triune, just like he is. That's what that means.
Questions or things that some people don't like. Like one of the people's favorite animal dies, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna see it in heaven."
You actually are.
You are.
Yeah. Yeah, God created animals for our pleasure, and heaven's going to be full of pleasure. So, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned dragons. Let's look at Job 41. Okay, Job 41. I'm just going to read this to you and let you decide. If you take a piece of this out, you can say, oh, it's a plesiosaur, which is a deep sea dinosaur that they actually have found fresh remains of. But that's not what it is. Here we go. Chapter 41. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Speaking? Yeah. Will it make an agreement with you for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of it like a bird or put it on a leash for the young women in your home? Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and you will never do it again. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? God saying, I created it, so you're going to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I have to pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength, and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck. Dismay goes before it. The folds of its flesh are tightly joined. They are firm and immovable. Its chest is hard as rock, hard as the lower millstone. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Sling stones are like chaff to it. A club seems to it but a piece of straw. It laughs at the rattling of the lance. Its undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. In one word, Leviathan, Godzilla.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Just with the flashing eyes and the armors down its back, that's where the picture of Godzilla comes from. It's actually Job 41. That's a dragon.
It's indestructible. Why isn't it so?
Nutrition. It didn't have anything to eat. It couldn't survive. And who knows? Gunpowder.
Tasty humans,
Yeah,
poison.
who knows?
The story of Job, I mean, he's just the parallel of extreme righteousness, and no matter how righteous or whatever, he still reigns over all.
Yeah. So Job was questioning God, but he didn't sin in the questions. And God put him in place. And this is one of those situations where, like, who are you to question me? I created Leviathan, and you know what Leviathan can do. That's what God was saying. Okay? We see the fossil record. It's undeniable. The problem is the time that it takes to get a fossil. The animal needs to be buried whole at one time while still alive, which is why most of the intact dinosaur bones that are dug up today, the pose of the dinosaur shows that they died of asphyxiation. If you look at the pictures of dinosaurs, old dinosaurs, you can see that their back is arched and their mouths are agape. They died gasping for air. So that's something also showing that a flood came, the mud covered them up immediately, causing their death. They need undisturbed ground and time that's needed to replace organic tissues with organic rock. That's why the evolutionists say it takes millions of years of pressure in order to get a dinosaur. And all of that changed in 1980 in Washington. What happened in 1980 in Washington? Mount St. Helens. So Mount St. Helens erupts. All of the trees that are on that side of the volcano gets laid down and covered in ash and mud. And within 20 years, guess what's bubbling up from the bottom of the water? Oil. It already converted that organic tissue, all the trees, any animals, to oil in 20 years. It didn't take millions of years. Petroleum products are already being formed in just that short amount of time. It has to do with the conditions, not the time. Okay, high pressure, trapped air, everything that was down below started the conversion. And I imagine if they start pulling some of the stumps and stuff from the bottom, that calcification might have already started, which is how you get petrified wood and fossils and stuff like that. Small or juvenile dinosaurs were taken on the ark by God's command. He didn't necessarily give the invite to all the dinosaurs, though. A T-Rex on the ark might not be a good idea, even a baby one. But God did keep the lions from eating the lambs, so don't know. All cultures have dragon stories. That's something to remember. What happens to the dragons at the end of the stories? They all get slayed. Okay, so what happened to the dinosaurs at the end of their story? They all got slain. Okay, so that's probably the tales not of the hero knight, but the extinction of the dinosaurs. That's probably where that came from. Any dino species today, they've been given modern names like hippopotamus and alligator. Okay, so rhinoceros. So that's all I have to answer those questions. And I don't know, maybe y'all have more questions now after what I just shared with you. The size of people. In putting this together, I came across a talk about giants.
Yeah.
We do know that there were giants pre-flood, but they should have been wiped out. Yeah, nothing. But they should have been wiped out by the flood. So how can we get the people of Gath, Goliath, in David's time, since that's so far after the flood? And again, we go back to DNA, recessive genes, and Noah and Mrs. Noah, Hashem and Japheth. We don't know about their wives. One of those wives could have been a descendant of a Nephilim, meaning as a recessive gene, she had gigantism in her DNA. And so an offspring down, recessive genes can pop up and become dominant. So somewhere down the line, they had a giant child that then now the giant gene is dominant, and its offspring will therefore also be giant. Midgets, same way. Can we say midget?
In this classroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
But see, there's dwarfs are different than midgets. That's why I still distinguish the two. They're different.
Well, there was like in, I think 1920, a boy that was born that was growing so fast and so big.
Robert Ludlow.
Yes, it's a documentary. I watched it. That was very interesting. He didn't live past what, 25?
Yeah, I think it was 25, 26.
Because his cells were growing so fast and he just became so,
Yeah, Robert Ludlow. It was in Ripley's Believe It or Not.
yeah.
So if you was to put it in one of those chambers where the pressure that's increased.
I don't know. I doubt it. He died because his muscles, gravity pulled down too hard on him, and his muscles couldn't hold him up anymore. And so asphyxiation and heart stress is what got him. Just couldn't survive.
So, different side of the topic, but same wise. The ice ages,
Yeah.
where do they fit in this.
Yeah.
It's just
So
creating
the ice age, the last ice age that we can talk about is actually called the Wisconsin age. And what happens is the whole atmosphere is now entirely different because of the collapse of the vapor canopy. And the way that light energy is reflected from the land is now gone because now we just have water until the floodwaters dissipate. And what happens is there is a massive earth cooling at the poles. And now that's when we start getting our ocean currents, our atmospheric currents, the jet stream, all of that stuff happens because of that. It sets up more of the modern type weather patterns. Well, part of that has to do with these dips of the jet stream, bringing the, what they call them, Arctic Express. They've been calling that for the past several years. And those happening as the Earth reaches its new equilibrium is going to take hundreds of years after the flood. And so these ice ages they're actually a result of the flood. Now, are they 10,000 years ago? No, they're more like 6,000 years ago. But that's reasonable when you talk about science time versus scripture time. Give or take 4,000 years, that's it. Yeah, and then the adaptation of the animals, the ones that are gonna live are the ones that have more fur and more fur and longer teeth. That's like the saber-toothed cat. Yeah, good stuff. I love this stuff. Get me jazzed. But next week, we're out. Yeah, we're gone for the holiday weekend, so you have next Sunday off from me. And then we're doing something completely different.
Dr. Thomas gonna come in and do anything?
No, I didn't ask him to this time. If y'all have any other questions about anything, feel free to just text me. Insects? Yeah.